قال موسى لربك أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شر أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم عبده ورسوله أما بعد وإذ قال موسى لفتاه لا أبره حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين أو أمضي حقبا. And recount to them the story of Musa alayhi salam, Moses. When Moses said to his servant, I will journey on until I reach the point where the two rivers meet, though I may march on for ages. This begins the journey of Musa and his companion, his teacher, later on with al-Khidhr. One of the first things we mentioned in episode 1 of this series on lessons from Surah al-Kahf is that this surah is made up mainly of four stories. It's composed of four main stories. The first is the story of the men in the cave. The second is the story of the men and the two gardens. The third story is the story of Musa and Khidr. And the fourth story is that of Dhul Qarnayn. We are going straight to the story of Musa and al-Khidr for this particular episode, inshallah. And so join us as we go on an adventure of knowledge, because this is about the adventure of knowledge, seeking knowledge and understanding the nature of knowledge, inshallah. Now, whenever we are studying the Quran, it's really, really important that we approach it, and the way we approach it, we should adopt in the reading and listening to Surah al-Kahf. What should be that approach? The approach should be, what can I learn from this surah? How can I relate to the characters in this surah? Is there a character that you can relate to? What can I put into practice? So these are the three things really that are essential whenever you are listening or you are studying the Quran. And really this type of series that we do and other ones that the Inspire Circles that are organized by Halaqah is really to invite you to study and reflect on the Quran and the Quranic message. And to do that, we have to ask ourselves, what can I learn from this surah? What can I learn from this verse? How do I relate? So in other words, how is that relevant to my life, to me? And what can I then put into practice? Now, one thing to look out for, there are a number of things I would say that we should be looking out for when we're studying Surah al-Kahf, for example, is the surah begins and ends with a discussion on the Quran. Why that? Why is that? What's the significance of that? The word ayah, sign, is used in different places in the surah, demonstrating the signs of God. What is the significance of that? Why signs are being mentioned? Compare and contrast the different stories. So we've gone through in one episode, one story, we're going through another story here. Just think about the different stories and the characters in each of those stories. Who are the good people in the surah and what are their characteristics? And who are the bad guys and what are their characteristics? So these are just a few pointers in trying to understand this surah, and when you are studying this surah, some pointers into thinking and reflecting upon, inshallah. So as we mentioned, the four stories, the four core stories of this surah is the young man and the cave, which we went through in the last episode. And then there is another story with the two men in the garden. We're now going to the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr. And the last story is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. So these are the four core stories. And each of these stories are about a trial. Each of the stories teach us something that is essential to the Islamic message and the understanding of Islam. And this is why we are encouraged to recite Surah al-Kahf or to memorize some parts of especially the first 10 verses of the surah. It's a constant reminder. It's a weekly reminder of the four core stories and the lessons that we learn from those stories, because they all relate to everyday situations that we face. Now, the key summary of the events that take place in this story needs to be understood first. Now, what happens is the Prophet Musa alayhi salam accompanies a servant of Allah. He's known as al-Khidhr or just Khidr, who takes him on a journey through three historical events. The first one is they travel on a boat and his companion makes a hole. So this person, the Khidr, and Musa alayhi salam, they're traveling, and what happens is he starts to make a hole in the boat. Now just imagine you are traveling with a group of people, you have a companion, you have a friend, or you have a mentor or a teacher sitting next to you, and he gets up and he starts to make a hole in the boat, placing every passenger at risk of being drowned. The second thing that happens is that they meet a boy whom his companion kills. So again, they're meeting this boy, and then your companion, your person who you're with, goes and kills that person without any justification, apparently to the great suffering of his parents, which we'll find out later. The third event that takes place is they enter a town where people are so evil that they refuse to even feed them. But his companion restores and rebuilds a crumbling wall, that he finds in the town without asking for any reward. So here he first risks everyone by making a hole in the boat. Secondly, he kills this boy without any reason, any apparent justification. And then he starts to build this wall for some reason that is not clear, because he doesn't actually ask for any wage for the job that he's carried out. So these three events take place while Musa alayhi salam is with this man. Now, in order to understand these three stories, before we dive into a little bit more detail into these three stories, we've got to understand history and how historical events from a Quranic perspective works. There must be meaning and purpose behind each event in history. Is it there? It is not an easy question to answer, but that's our understanding. There has to be some meaning, some reason behind it. Now, Prophet Musa alayhi salam might have been facing a similar predicament as he watched hundreds of thousands of his people groaning under the yoke of Pharaoh's oppression and tyranny, and with Pharaoh refusing to bow down before the truth after each turn of events. So Musa sets out on a journey to seek knowledge and gain insight into the meanings that may exist beyond the incomprehensible events, seeking the why of events and history. That's what he's trying to understand. What is the background to this? So one of the key things that we have to understand here is that as human beings, man is not aware of the wisdom underlying the events that take place under God's dispensation. Sometimes we don't understand an event that takes place in our own life, and something happens as a result of that thing. What if that event didn't take place? What could have happened? We don't know. And this is why very often it's a mystery why certain events happen. And perhaps even the time that we're living in, where we have COVID-19 all around us. And one may have asked, why we're going through an event like this. We don't know, would be the first answer to that. We believe there may be some wisdom underlying those events that take place. But as human beings, as to the best of our knowledge, we have to go with what we know, which is to rely on the science that is available, and of course rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we continue to make dua to help us and to alleviate us from this situation that we find ourselves in. The second thing to keep in mind is that sometimes it seems like the wrongdoers, people who do injustices and so on, often prosper and innocents suffer hardship. So doubts can easily arise, because people might say, well, why is it that these people are suffering while the good people, or the bad people, or people who have wronged others, they are succeeding? So to enable Musa alayhi salam, or Moses, to comprehend the wisdom underlying those events, which baffle one's understanding that God slightly lifts the curtain from the reality which governs the workings of the world. Musa alayhi salam, or Moses, was able to appreciate that appearances are quite different from the reality. Appearances are quite different from the reality. So when did this event take place? That's not clear when it took place. And if you remember, the first thing that I mentioned in the first episode is that the Quran is very clear that it's not interested in telling us a history or historical event for the sake of it. There is a purpose behind it, and there is a message behind it. And so it's not a chronological order of events that take place. It is not interested in the exact historical events and when it took place, how it took place, where it took place, and so on, because it's not a book of history. It's a book of lessons and messages, and asking us to look at the signs for thinking and for pondering. So one of the things is that it's not clear. Now, Quran is clear that after the exodus from Egypt, Musa alayhi salam spent all his life in the Sinai area, or in the wilderness. So you cannot say it happened then. Now, one opinion is that it probably happened in the early phase of the prophethood. This is when he was in need of a surah like this. And it seems the Israelites, the Bani Israel, faced conditions similar to those facing the Muslims during the Meccan phase of the Prophet's life. And as you would remember, in the first episode, I mentioned about the context in which the surah was revealed, and it was revealed at a time when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was in need of those lessons, and his companions, his community. Some people say it's likely that Egyptians felt agitated seeing their tormentors flourishing while they suffered grievously. And so they needed a story like the companions of the cave. They needed a story to understand that certain events take place for a particular purpose, and for understanding the wisdom behind it. So Musa alayhi salam cried, "Our Lord, you bestowed upon Pharaoh and his noble splendor and riches in the world. Our Lord, have you done this that they may lead people astray from your path?" So again, it is probable that the Prophet Musa alayhi salam traveled towards the Sudan, and the place referred to in the Quran by the expression Majma' al-Bahraini in verse 60 is located near Khartoum, where the two main branches of the Nile, the Blue Nile and the White Nile, you can see a map of this to actually get a better understanding of this. Or Mediterranean and the Red Sea meeting place, where the Bitter Lakes and the Timsah takes along the Suez Canal. Maybe the point where the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba at the northern end of the Red Sea. But the point of all of this is that it could be anywhere around those areas. But for us, what's really important is we go into the stories and what lessons we can learn. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa alayhi salam about another man blessed far more knowledge than him. So Musa alayhi salam was obviously very curious. He wanted to know, who is this man? Who is this person, and what kind of knowledge did he have that Musa alayhi salam didn't have? And something to keep in mind here is that Musa alayhi salam is not arrogant or na'udzu billah, or somebody who was feeling like he's the most knowledgeable. From his point of view, if you are the prophet, you're normally the most knowledgeable person, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unveils for you certain knowledge that others do not have. So to know that there was another person who had some knowledge more than he did, it's something that he obviously was very curious and he wanted to know more about. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ لَا أَبْرَهُ حَتَّى أَبْلُغَ مَجْمَعَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ أَوْ أَمْضِيَ حُقُبًا. And mention when Musa alayhi salam said to his servant, I will cease traveling until I reach the junction of the two seas, or continue for a long period. Now, you frequently witness that the wrongdoers prosper, whereas the innocent suffer the hardship. And I'm going to come back to some of these things a little bit later, but I think the key point I want to make here is that for a long period, Musa alayhi salam had a purposeful journey. He says, I will not see it until I reach the junction of the two seas, or continue for a long period. Huquba could be ages, 1 year, 8 years. It's a resolve than a time that is specific. So what happened was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa alayhi salam that he could find this very intelligent man at a place where the two seas met. But that's a really big area. So Musa alayhi salam was confused about how he would find the man. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to take a salted fish along with him, and when the fish got away from him, then he would know that he had reached the correct place. So what happened was, فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَجْمَعَ بَيْنِهِمَا نَسِيَ حُوتَهُمَا فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ سَرَبًا. But when they reached the junction between them, they forgot their fish, and it took its course into the sea. Most likely from the, as I mentioned here, from the early prophethood, but probably there is a cooked fish, as flying into the sea may have been a sign, as the servant was amazed at being alive. The whole trip was full of surprises, as you know. So the adventure began. Musa alayhi salam and a younger helper, this younger helper is also known as Yusha ibn Nun, Yusha bin Nun, set off on the journey to find this knowledgeable man. So young Yusha put the salted fish in a pot and carried it along with them. They traveled far and finally arrived at the place where the two seas met. They were exhausted and fell asleep on a rock. Whilst they slept, the fish jumped out of the pot that Yusha had put in. And just then Yusha alayhi salam woke up. He saw the fish jump into the sea and swim away at super speed, leaving a tunnel-like trail behind. فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ سَرَبًا. That it took away its through the sea as in a tunnel. Now, when they had passed beyond it, Musa said to his boy, آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. Bring us our morning meal. We have certainly suffered in this, our journey, much fatigue. So Musa alayhi salam had gone beyond the place and had to trace back. So they didn't actually check on the fish, and they had forgotten. So when Musa alayhi salam and Yusha woke up as they continued their journey looking for the meeting spot, finally when they stopped to rest, this is when Musa alayhi salam asked this question. He said, did you not see when we retired to the rock? Indeed, I forgot that about the fish, and none made me forget except for Shaitan, that I should mention it. So Yusha forgot to mention it to Musa alayhi salam, and they've gone a bit further ahead. So قال أرأيت إذ أوينا إلى الصخرة فإني نسيت الحوت وما أنسانيه إلا الشيطان أن أذكره واتخذ سبيله في البحر عجبا. He said, did you not see when we retired to the rock? Indeed, I forgot there the fish, and none made me forget it except Shaitan, that I should mention it. And it took its course into the sea amazingly. So Yusha, as I mentioned, forgot to mention the fish flying out. Then Musa alayhi salam said, that is what we were seeking. قَالَ ذَلِكَ مَا كُنَّا نَبْغِي. That's what we were seeking. So they returned following their footprints. Now, the servant obviously does not know about the meeting. Maybe a secret of Musa alayhi salam, as the servant does not join the journey. So he leaves the servant and continues. And then at that point in time, they found a servant from among our servants, فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا, to whom we had given mercy from us and had taught him from us a certain knowledge. Now, authentic tradition said that this person was called Khidr. Maududi, for example, in his Tafhim al-Quran, he says, no divine law permits man to damage things which belongs to others or to kill an innocent person. Even if a person knew from ilham, he has no right to break the law. So therefore, this is something that whatever he does, he's been given a special knowledge by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be able to do that. Now, قال موسى هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. Musa alayhi salam said to him, may I follow you on the condition that you teach me from what you have been taught of sound judgment. So here, Musa alayhi salam is asking this man, Khidr, can you teach me something? I will follow you, and can you teach me some lessons? So Musa is very polite to the man, something that is characteristic of the Prophet. There is no judgment. He is actually truly interested. He said, you know, هل أتبعك, can I follow you? And أن تعلمني, and you teach me مما علمت رشدا, that you from what you have been taught of sound judgment. So Khidr is a title. That's something, not a proper name. It means green. That's why khadrawat, vegetables, and so on, is to do with green and so therefore Khidr is from, many say is from the awliya. Mystical groups have this view. He is alive and still guides and so on. This is not tenable, not mentioned in the Quran and Hadith. Musa had been alive, he would have followed me. So Musa can't be learning from a man like this. So Khidr was a prophet according to others, and he was an angel according to some. But whatever the condition is, that he was a man of knowledge. He was given a special type of knowledge to the extent that he was able to teach a prophet like Musa alayhi salam. That's the key thing that we need to take from this. So قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. So you have now Khidr is saying, no, indeed with me you won't be able to have the patience to learn. Okay, so Khidr obviously knows something here, that I know you are Musa, I know who you are, that you just don't have enough patience to learn. Now, basic condition agreed by Musa before the start of the journey is that he would bear with patience, because it says ma'ya sabra. You have to have sabr in order to learn. So it is mentioned in Bukhari, may Allah have mercy on Musa. We wish he had remained patient, then we would have learned more about other events and gained more insight. That gives you a clue that perhaps Musa alayhi salam did not remain so. And again, it's not a sign of weakness, but a sign of his own humanity as well, that in those circumstances, and sign of his own morality, because when something is wrong, clearly wrong, is witnessed, you would question it. وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. And how can you have patience for what you do not encompass in knowledge? So if you don't understand something, how can you have knowledge? So the man reiterates the difficulty ahead. So Khidr is saying, look, I'm giving you a warning beforehand. So Musa was the most knowledgeable person, yet humility in front of someone who may know more. That's another little lesson that we learn as well. And this is a warning to the Jews at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Even if Musa was here and faced Muhammad, he would have learnt from him. And that was one of the lessons at the time, people who were the Jewish community in the Prophet's time is being taught as well. قال ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا. Musa alayhi salam said, you will find me if Allah wills patient, and I will not disobey you in any order. So Musa alayhi salam agrees, and the two set out together on this journey. قال فإن اتبعتني قال تسألني عن شيء حتى أحدث لك منه ذكرا. He said, so now Khidr is saying, don't ask me any questions. If you follow me, do not ask me about anything until I make to you to you about it mentioned. In other words, until I make it clear to you about what has happened. Now, the key learning so far, the urgency of seeking knowledge. Message to the Jews, your own Prophet Musa would have accepted new knowledge, is one of the key messages that comes to the Jewish community at the time. Don't let knowledge lead you to arrogance or pride and khidr. And the manners of seeking knowledge, the eagerness to learn, willing to travel long distance. Sometimes nowadays we're not willing to travel from, or even to go to our computer in front of Zoom to go and seek knowledge. Think about how easy it has become for us. The next thing is humility. Can you learn from someone who knows less than you? Patience, determination, long time suggested by use of the word huquba. It could have been for long periods of time. So we don't know exactly how long. It's a gradual process. Everything can't be learned at one go. So another lesson that Khidr is teaching Musa alayhi salam, and is teaching all of us. And you've got to have the mercy as well as knowledge together. Very important lessons, especially those of us, and all of us should be seekers of knowledge, inshallah. So we move on. فانطلق حتى إذا ركب في السفينة خرقها قال أخرقتها لتغرق أهلها لقد جئت شيئا إمرا. So they set out until when they had embarked on the ship, and Khidr tore it open. Remember, he creates a hole. What does Musa alayhi salam say? Have you torn it open to drown his people? You have certainly done a grave thing. So they join a group of fishermen. They're all at sea, and the man makes a hole in the boat. Why would anyone do such a thing? Musa alayhi salam forgets the conversation. What does he do? He breaks the promise in this sense, because he said, I'm not going to ask you a question. He asks the question. So, قال ألم أقل إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. And Khidr says, did I not say that with me you would never be able to have patience? So Khidr bears with it and reminds Musa alayhi salam. قال لا تؤاخذني بما نسيت ولا ترهقني من أمري عسرا. And Musa alayhi salam, do not blame me for what I forgot, and do not cover me in my matter with difficulty. So Musa regrets and realizes, and his overreaction, saying that he completely forgot. And Musa alayhi salam did not reproach Yusha, but not Khidr with Musa either. So Khidr accepts his apologies and they move on. So the first incident has now happened. فانطلق. So they set out until when they met a boy. Al-Khidr kills him. Musa alayhi salam says, أقتلت نفسا زكية بغير نفس لقد جئت شيئا نكرا. Have you killed a pure soul for other than having killed a soul? You have certainly done a deplorable thing. Now we have a blatant murder of a young man without provocation or justification. That was too much for Musa alayhi salam to handle. So he remembered his promise, but unable to keep quiet when he witnessed the murder. Imra was worse than nukra. That's the word that is, you have nukra. Zakiyatan bi ghayri laqad ji'ta shay'an nukra. You've done something terrible. Now the boy was probably underage, so he could not be held accountable for any misdeeds. So more evidence that Khidr was maybe a prophet, as only a prophet is allowed to do this. That could be another point to keep in mind. However, that he's not listed amongst the prophets. It's for our understanding only that this opinion is there. قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. So Khidr said, did I not tell you that with me you would never be able to have patience? So Khidr again reminds, incident number 2, أقل لك. Previously it was ألم أقل. So أقل لك, I'm telling you. So what happens again? If I should ask you about anything after this, Musa alayhi salam said, then do not keep me as a companion. You have obtained from me an excuse. So Musa realizes that this is the second time and apologizes, and he gives himself one last chance. فانطلق. So they set out until when they came to the people of a town. They asked his people for food, but they refused to offer them any kind of hospitality. And they found therein a wall about to collapse. So Al-Khidr restored it. Musa alayhi salam then said, قال لو شئت لاتخذت عليه أجرا. If you wished, you could have taken for it a payment. Why did you do this job free? You could have taken a payment for this. So here, Khidr again reminds هذا قال هذا فراق بيني وبينك. This is the parting between me and you. سأنبئك بتأويل ما لم تستطع عليه صبرا. I will now inform you of the interpretation of that about which you could not have patience. So Musa no longer has any excuses left, and they have to part company. And of course, before parting company, Khidr kindly agrees that he will share with him the reasons or the knowledge behind these three incidents, these historical events. So I'm going to skip this bit. So he says, أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها وكان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا. And for the ship, it belonged to poor people working at sea. So I intended to cause defect in it, as there was after them a king who seized every good ship by ship. The boat was saved from a greater harm. So the damage was a kindly action. If it was a working ship, then this king would have seized it and taken it off. So it was a way to help these poor people. That's what the first one that Al-Khidr is explaining. And as for the boy, وَأَمَّا الْغُلَامِ فَكَانَ أَبَوَاهُ مُؤْمِنَيْنِ فَخَشِينَا أَنْ يُرْهِقَهُمَا طُغْيَانًا وَكُفْرًا. His parents were believers, and we feared that he would overburden them by transgression and disbelief. He knew that this boy would grow to be evil. So again, it was a kindly action. Of course, it is not up to us. We can't, for example, look at a boy and maybe look at his behavior and say he's going to turn out to be a terrible one. Let's kill him, or let's lock him up. That is not for us to decide, not even for whatever knowledge that we have. That's a very specialist knowledge that was given for these incidents to teach us something. وَأَمَّا الْغُلَامُ فَكَانَ أَبَوَاهُ مُؤْمِنَيْنِ. And as for the boy, his parents were believers, as we mentioned. So, وَأَمَّا الْجِدَارُ. And as for the subhanallah, the wall, فَكَانَ لِغُلَامَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. There was an orphan. There were orphans in this Medina, in this city. وَكَانَ تَحْتَ تَلَّهُمَا وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. So the two boys, their parents were they were صالحة. So you have the word صالحة, which means that they were pious, they were righteous, they were good people. And what happened was, so again, you have to think, what was it that Khidr had in mind in actually creating this wall? What's the reason behind that? So it belonged to two orphans, boys in the city, and there was beneath the actual wall was some treasure. Okay, and their father was a righteous man. So your Lord, it goes on to say, وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا فَأَرَادَ رَبُّكَ أَنْ يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُمَا وَيَسْتَخْرِجَ كَنْزَهُمَا رَحْمَةً مِّن رَبِّكَ وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِ ذَلِكَ تَأْوِيلُ مَا لَمْ تَسْطِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا. So your Lord desired that you should attain their maturity and take out their treasure, and mercy from your Lord. And I did not do it out of my own accord. This is the significance of that which you could not have patience. This place had treasure underneath, and if the wall fell, people would have found the treasures. Khidr makes clear he has received this knowledge from Allah. Okay, this is rahmatan min rabbik, not from himself. So what are the key lessons that we ourselves could take from this? We have to understand Allah is al-alim, the all-knowing, with knowledge of everything that has happened and that will happen. And this story is closely linked to the Ashabul Kahf, the companions of the cave. Both agree that what lies beyond our human perception should be left totally to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who will conduct it on the basis of his perfect knowledge. Don't be quick to judge others. other people. We don't have knowledge of everything. Very often we pick up, have a little bit of knowledge, and we're quickly judging, even if they have done something wrong, even if they have done something bad, how we are quick to judge others. We have to put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We might not understand what is happening or why it's happening, but we must be patient and content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are some of the core lessons that we learn. You can carry on. Don't forget the promises we make. Allah always stick to a promise made. No matter how clever we think we are, always remember it's a mercy and blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, there's always someone who is more knowledgeable than us. So be humble, have humility despite. And it could be a knowledge of Islam, knowledge of religion, knowledge of a particular subject or specialism that you have in. Don't ever stop learning and seeking knowledge. Musa alayhi salam taught us that. Seek as much knowledge as you can and pass it on. Knowledge of the Quran is the best knowledge. This is according to our deen. Gaining more knowledge of the Quran helps you to have more wisdom and understanding. And the next point is the power of dua, making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always make dua to Allah to increase us in knowledge. And we have this dua, Allahumma ja'alli fi qalbi nura wa basaran wa fahman wa ilman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. O Allah, let my heart be filled with light, insight, understanding and knowledge. Verily you have power over all things. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. If there are any questions, inshallah, or anybody want to share anything related to your understanding, please feel free to share this, inshallah. وجزاكم الله خيرا. Shukran to everyone. Thank you all very much for joining us for this session on the second in this series on lessons from Surah al-Kahf, which was on Musa and al-Khidhr. Join us again as we go into another story from Surah al-Kahf in the future, inshallah. This was this event on this Zoom session was brought to you by Hounslow Muslim Center in association with Faith Inspire. Please try and join other events by Hounslow Muslim Center and Faith Inspire for future, and give us any suggestions or ways that we're able to improve and make sure that we're able to meet your needs, and so that we can do the right kind of teaching and learning and building our community, inshallah. Take care, and hopefully, inshallah, we all start our adventure like Musa alayhi salam towards seeking knowledge. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.